All right. Let's sit up tall. We'll close the eyes. Take a nice breath in and a nice breath out. And just allow yourself to land softly in this moment. And feel that you are grounded, safe, secure, basking in the light of the sacred. That the Divine Mother, the Divine Father, that consciousness which moves throughout everything is bringing life to you, love to you, experience to you, giving you every opportunity to come to know yourself, the innermost sacred self, and all the little selves that you think you are. Giving you all the opportunities to learn, to live, and to be. Drawing the hands together in front of the heart. We'll lift our voices in one Om. Take a breath in. Om. And bowing the head toward the heart. And drawing the face to center. And then release the hands. And so in thinking about what we would talk about today, judgment came up. I don't plan these things ahead of time. I wait and kind of see how the day feels. And at the end of class, I read one of my very favorite poems by Rumi, which is called Your First Eyes. And so I'm going to read it to you now. This is a very beautiful poem. It's an affirmation of our inner intelligence. Hopefully it comes up now. Internet. Let's see, we'll try it a different way. There we go. A lover has 4 streams inside of water, wine, honey, and milk. For those, find those in yourself and pay no attention to what so-and-so says about such and such. The rose does not care if someone calls it a thorn or a jasmine. Ordinary eyes categorize human beings. That one is a Zoroastrian, this one is a Muslim. Walk instead with the other vision given you, your first eyes. Bow to the essence in a human being. Do not be content with judging people good and bad. Grow out of that. The great blessing is that Shams has poured a strength into the ground that lets us wait and trust the waiting. I've read that poem literally 1,000,000 times, and still goosebumps. Because the truth that it offers is so profound. And it is the truth of the way we perceive the world. Think about it. When you wake up in the morning, when you open your eyes, how do you feel? Most of the time, given a good night's sleep and other, all things falling into some type of balanced place, you don't feel much of anything except peace. You typically don't wake up and are immediately disturbed. It's to this, it's to that, the world this, the world that. Unless you're in a state of fight or flight, which is another conversation, as so many people are in the world today. But normally, under healthy conditions, when we wake up in the morning, we are seeing with eyes very similar to our first eyes. Eyes that haven't yet begun judging, categorizing, separating, rationalizing, justifying. Eyes that haven't begun to be violent in the way they see, in the way that they perceive. When we were born into this life, into this body, we opened our eyes and there was no judgment. There was only pure wonder. Pure wonder at This is so much different than where I just was. What is this? Can you imagine what a little baby must feel? No judgment. No, this is good, this is bad. At least not until the doctor swatted them on the butt. So happy they don't do that anymore. Right? Then there was a little judgment. What was the judgment? I don't like that. So there was the cry because there was a shock, right? But prior to that, there was no judgment. There was only being. This is very important for us in our spiritual seeking to contemplate, because much of our suffering comes from a place of judgment and judgmentalism. Judgment is not necessarily a bad thing. As Rumi suggested, we want to move away from the idea of good and bad. It's too black and white. And instead, think about healthy. Think about life-affirming. Think about potential. If we use our judgment to ridicule, to separate, to hate, to demean, to devalue, is that healthy? Are we cultivating a healthy world and a healthy worldview? Or are we creating a prison in which we will find ourselves and those who we have judged locked away? If we use our judgment in a way that simply acknowledges, now it's daytime, it's a great time to get up and go out and work in the garden, come to yoga class, let's do this. If we use our judgment in a way that just kind of guides us without the harsh criticisms, is that healthy? Most of the time, yes. As long as it's not apathetic. So we have this judgment, and on the one extreme, it's very violent because it points fingers at people and condemns. On the other hand, it also has a tendency to become very extreme because it's associated with apathy. The judgment of apathy is the judgment of hopelessness. It's a judgment that doesn't leave room for growth, for potential. It's a judgment that allows us to dwell in the sense of being taken advantage of nothing ever goes my way, those types of things. Does that make sense? Yeah, so we have these two extremes. And as the Buddha so notoriously stated, extremes are not healthy. What we must seek is the middle road. So what is the middle road of judgment? Well, the Bhagavad Gita tells us in chapter 17, verse 2. The Bhagavad Gita tells us, Krishna states in there, that in nature there are three gunas. There is rajas, tamas, and sattva. And that when we recognize these three gunas and what they represent, then, I'm paraphrasing, but basically we will not have a need to judge them because we will understand them and the tonic that alleviates their impact upon us. And then we can simply live in harmony with what nature presents to us. Tamas, lethargy, apathy, dullness, a sense of disinterest. Think about the leaves at the bottom of the pile in the fall and how they're just kind of laying there and not doing much. Don't talk to me about gardening right now. We're not talking about the composting aspect of it. We're talking about they're just kind of dead leaves and they're symbolically not doing anything. Over time, they will move into a rajasic state, though, right? They will move into a passionate state, and they will become, what will they become? Amazing compost for the garden, right? And then they'll move into maybe a sattvic state when they're in the garden and they're prompting the seeds to sprout and the plants to grow. So these are the three modes that everything comes into. Tamas, lethargy. Rajas, passion, movement, activity. And sattva, balance or purity. Once we recognize this, we don't have to say that tamas is bad. It's not bad. You need tamas when it's time to sleep. Could you imagine being rajasic all the time? Like it's 11:30 p.m., I've got a 6 a.m. appointment, and rajas is way up here. I'm not going to get sleep. So we need tamas. We need some aspect of tamas to help us to quiet down, to help us to get ready for bed, to go to sleep, and to remain there in a way that is uninterrupted. Additionally, there is an aspect of tamas, although we don't want to romanticize it, but there's an aspect of tamas that must be present, just a little tiny bit, in order for us to open the window of opportunity to see the potential for peace. War is rajas, right? War is rajas. War is this kind of hyper-passionate engagement, which is very violent. We don't go from violence to peace. There's a point where it collapses, and the collapse is tamas. So the war, the rajasic nature of war collapses because everybody's tired, because there's just been enough destruction. And I'm not here talking necessarily about world wars. I'm talking about the war within ourselves. Have you ever been at war with yourself? And one moment you're just like, I am just so tired. That tiredness opens up the window of opportunity for you to see that you can be something other than rajasic. Then what you do with that, next, you don't just go into a tamasic state of being where you're always apathetic, always tired, just stay in bed for the next 6 months. No. You meditate. You practice some yoga. You practice self-care. You get out in nature and start walking. You engage with sattva, with balance. You engage. You seek that out. Once we understand this, and we understand that tamas, rajas, and sattva are natural. They exist in nature. These tendencies are present in every single one of us. Then we don't need to go home and look at our child and say, why are you being so lazy not cleaning your room? Any of you ever have your parents say that to you? Did it make you feel good? Did it make you feel loved and honored? Of course not. So instead, the parent can look and recognize, tamas. How do I work with my child in order to shift that tamasic energy into a little bit of healthy rajas so that maybe the room gets cleaned? And then maybe towards sattva, where they understand what cleanliness is and the importance of it. But without the violence associated with the screaming and the yelling and the punishment. Because I don't know about you, but my childhood punishments didn't teach me very much, except how to punish. Right? Does this make sense so far? Yeah. So when we look at judgment, we can say that on the one extreme, the tendency for us to judge harshly and violently, to look at another person and don't even have to know that person, They might look different than us, be older or younger than us. They may be heavier or thinner than us. They may just look a certain way. Maybe they have spikes and hair spiked, and wearing leather or something like that. And we automatically go to this judgment mode. Sometimes we'll even cross the street and go on the other side of the street. That's a judgment. Certainly, sometimes it's a safety, but most times it's just a judgment. There's a story about a woman. She was walking through the city by herself, and she found herself lost. She didn't know where she was, and there were a group of young men coming toward her, and they looked much different than she did. She got very nervous, and she walked over to the other side of the road and saw a single gentleman standing by himself, and a little bit older than what the younger ones were on the other side of the road. And so she approached him, and she said, I don't really know where I am. Could you help me out and give me some directions? And he said, sure, I'll walk with you. Where is it that you want to go? I'll make sure you get out of this area safely. So she told him where she was going, and he started walking with her, and he walked her into an alley where he robbed her. Our sense of perception is not always clear. And oftentimes what we perceive of, what we judge as a threat, is not a threat at all. And what we judge as safe is actually not at all. And this can cause within us a sense of great uncertainty. How do I tell then? How do I know if what I'm perceiving is accurate or not? Well, we're never really going to know 100%. We're never going to have a guarantee. But what we can do is we can step back a little bit from our judgments, and while maybe that would have changed that situation for the young woman, maybe it wouldn't have, there is this beautiful practice of asking for guidance. Please let me move without fear. Please let me find my way to whatever destination I am meant to end up at. Please guide me through your grace. Some people are not comfortable with that, and that's fine. Asking for divine guidance. From a practical perspective in the world, we can look at the Bhagavad Gita and we can recognize the presence of one of those three gunas, or all three, inside of ourselves. And we can say, am I acting from a place of tamas, from rajas, or from sattva? If I'm running away from something that I don't know poses a threat to me, then that's not sattva. If I'm running blindly towards something that I think is going to save me, that's not balance. That's either tamas or rajas. So then we can stop and say to ourselves, what are my other options? What can I do? What am I not seeing? What am I not perceiving? Does that make sense? On the other extreme, we have the tendency to take judgment and to use it as an excuse. Well, every time I'm in a relationship, this happens. That's a judgment. It's a judgment. It's also a false judgment, because every time you're in a relationship, it doesn't happen. It's just that maybe it happens more often than not, or it's left a big impact or impression upon you this time. So when it comes to kind of this apathetic judgment, where we're using it as a justification for our own wallowing and self-pity, we need to pull ourselves up out of that and recognize the story that we're feeding ourselves. But don't I have the right to wallow in my own self-pity if I want to? I mean, I am free after all. My suggestion to you is that if you're wallowing in self-pity, then you're not allowing yourself to be free. You're actually chained to self-pity. And self-pity is a devastating experience, because it does not seek out your potential to grow, to change. It does not seek out your potential for happiness, for joy. To wallow in self-pity is to not seek out a solution. If you have something to grieve, grieve. If you have something to be angry about, be angry. If you have something to be sad for, be sad. If you have something to be joyful for, be joyful. Just be. But when the self-pity party comes around, tell yourself, this is not the party for me, because it's looking to entrap me in a state of being that is highly judgmental, not only of myself, but of all those around me. Because self-pity denies love, denies friendship, denies trust. Self-pity denies personal growth, denies imagination and potential. Self-pity denies divinity. Self-pity denies life itself. So, for those so spiritually inclined, when you feel that self-pitying kind of judgment is coming, the apathetic judgment is coming, to the surface for you, you can reach out for sacred guidance. You can look for inspiration in the mantras, in your study, in your practice. How many of you go to your yoga mat when you're not feeling well, when you're kind of, mentally low? That's the ideal time to go to your yoga mat, is when you're having some kind of an emotional difficulty. That's the perfect time to go to your yoga mat. Because your yoga practice, whether it be asana or breath work or meditation or chanting or any of the yogic techniques, what they're going to show you is the potential that self-pity denies. They're going to show you the potential that the other extreme judgment denies. All those techniques show you the potential of the middle road, the potential of you. And if it's your potential, it's also the potential of every other being that is anywhere near like you. All human beings share the same potential, the radiance of the light within, and the realization of unity with no violence, because those two are opposed to one another. You cannot have unity and violence. Violence tears things apart. Unity accepts their interconnectedness on the sacred realm. Make sense? So if we're saying that we're spiritual seekers, if we're saying that we're looking to cultivate a relationship with Krishna or with Christ or with Durga or Kali, then one of the first things we must do is be honest with ourselves about the violence that we enact. Because that violence is one of the utmost obstacles to that relationship. If we're busy committing violence, then what we're doing is we're building up a storehouse of guilt. We're building up a storehouse of stories. We're building up the ego, whether it's in an egoic, I'm great kind of way or an egoic, I'm horrible kind of way. Both of those are ego, right? So whenever we're acting in violence, we're building the ego. And we're tearing down the potential for us to see the reality of ourselves. To see that our reality, the innermost self, is peace. I know in psychology, way back in the day, they used to say, man's nature is beast. It's like, no, it's not. Man's nature is not beast. Nothing's nature is the beast. The beast is a disturbance. Is the ocean's nature to be a beast? To be at storm? To have waves, 20 feet tall crashing into one another? Is that the ocean's nature? Or is that a disturbance in the ocean based on many other factors? And the ocean's character, the ocean's nature is actually to be calm. Would you agree? Right. You are like the ocean. Your nature is to be calm, peaceful. But when you're disturbed, and judgment is disturbance, when it is not healthy judgment, then you become the storm. And the storm brings about so much suffering. Boats get capsized, lives lost, potential drowned. So if you are calling yourself a spiritual seeker, if I'm calling myself a spiritual seeker, then one of the responsibilities that we have is to seek out the ways in which we are the storm and begin to make life changes so that we are less stormy and more calm, which is not easy. It's not easy. It's not easy giving up judgments. Maybe our parents and our grandparents and our siblings all told us the same thing. And we base our worldview on what we've been told. It's not easy to let go of that impression, that kind of, training, right? Not easy. But if we really wish to discover unity, to discover the peace within ourselves, we have to face it and ask ourselves, is this true? The only way that ignorance is wiped out is through knowledge. That's it. The Tattva Bodha teaches us that. The Atma Bodha, for those of you in that program, teaches us that. The Bhagavad Gita teaches us that. The only reconciliation, or the only, not reconciliation, but the only way to alleviate the effect of ignorance is through knowledge. We can't just say, well, I'm just not ignorant anymore. If you haven't done any of the work to quash the ignorance and to open the self up to the truth. So no matter what it is, we should constantly be asking ourselves, is this perception correct? Is it real? Is there any part of it that is not? I had a good friend, and she wrote a letter to an aunt that she had who was not a favorite aunt. And in the family would often be very difficult. And there were some family things that had to be taken care of, and so she wrote this letter. And it was like, let's just say 3 pages long. She let the letter sit there because she wrote the letter from a place of, I need to write this letter. Now, the moment you say that to yourself, I need to write this letter, you know that much of what's in there is an emotional reaction or a judgment to something. But is it genuinely real? Is it true? And so she let it sit there, and then she went back to it, and she asked herself, she read through it, and she said, is this necessary, what's being said? And she crossed out all the lines that weren't necessary, or that she felt weren't necessary in that moment. Is this violent or hurtful? She crossed out all the lines that were violent and hurtful. Went through it again. Is it true? She crossed out all the lines that weren't true. And then she had like 2 lines left, like love, me, and that was pretty much all. Because the rest of it was a judgment. A judgment. And it wasn't the middle road kind of judgment that seeks out understanding or health or wellness or balance. It was one of the 2 extremes. It was either that which sought to separate or that which thought to have the pity party. And we can do both of those things at the same time. We can judge to annihilate another person at the same time that we're having a pity party for ourselves. And that makes it even more difficult, is when we're working from a place where we're using these 2 extremes at the same time. Then it seems like the rational middle road is lost to us. I think they call it mob mentality, when this happens to a large group of people and they can no longer see rationally. But it happens within us too. That same exact thing is that, this is the party. The mob is the 2 extremes and our ego. And then our hearts can't make it through, can't see that there's another way, another possibility. We don't always have to lash out. We don't always have to throw the first punch. We don't always have to send off the last insult and have the last word. We don't always have to make other people look bad. We don't always have to do these things. And yet, so much of the imbalance that we experience in this life causes us to do just that. Causes us to say, if I don't knock this one down, then how am I going to be lifted up? We haven't been taught yet in this life that, lifting up there's enough room for all of us there. There's enough room. It's not just for one person or 2 people. The lifting up is all of us together. It's the unity. And in order for that to happen, we really have to let go of a lot of the judgments, if not all of them. So again, just kind of recapping, 2 extremes. One is very violent. They both really are. But one is violently separatist and the other is the inner pity. The middle road of judgment is the healthier judgment. It's the one that's seeing clearly and not using what one thinks one knows as a weapon against anyone, including one's own self. So when we get a little bit of understanding, a little bit of knowledge, a little bit of information, we weaponize it, right? We say, I got that gossip down, yeah. And then we weaponize it. So in that middle road, we're not weaponizing anything. We're just saying, okay, maybe that's a fact, maybe it's not a fact. What do I know? Someone comes into the ashram, let's just say, and they're not in a very good mood, And someone comes up and says, "Oh, that person, maybe they're in a foul mood. Maybe they're always in a foul mood." And so you got to step back and say, No one in this world is always in a foul mood. So there must be something happening. How can I cultivate a sanctuary for this person so that they have a place where they feel safe, where if this is what they need to express, they can in a safe, healthy way. And I don't have to invest in it. I don't have to become the victim of it. I don't have to become, talk myself into being the center of their story. It's not my story. This is their story. This is their work. I don't have to be the center of that. I don't have to contribute to it. I don't have to deny it. All I'm asked to do in any given moment is either witness it passively or leave it alone because it doesn't belong to me. And I love, I don't know if it's a new saying or an old saying, but not my monkeys, not my circus. The first time I heard that, I was on the floor laughing. It's so funny. It came up at a point in time where there was just a lot going on. I thought, not my circus, not my monkeys. That's really interesting because depending upon the way one says that, it could be either extreme or the middle, right? So if it's said in a way of, those are not my monkeys, they're yours, that's violent, right? Not my monkeys, not my circus, but you're always trying to put them on my shoulders, that's the pity party. Or just, not my monkeys. So I'm not going to contribute to this. I'm not going to add to the suffering. This doesn't belong to me. It doesn't require me to do anything. And one of my other favorite sayings is, 100% of everything will work itself out without you. Isn't that so sad? Considering all the time we spend putting our 2 cents into everything, to know that 100% of everything will work itself out without your input. It's like, oh, darn. And there I thought I was self-important again, So we have these different aspects of judgment. We have the Bhagavad Gita that shares with us, that says, if you study human nature and the universe, the world around you, if you come to know, to understand that within nature there are these 3 gunas, tamas, rajas, and sattva, and you understand that the nature of these 3 characteristics is changeability. That which is tamas is not always going to be tamas. That which is rajas is not always going to be rajas, and that which is sattva is not always going to be sattva. That change is part of nature. If we can look and say that, to realize it, to study it, to understand it to some degree, then we'll find that we have less and less reason to judge. Because a judgment is a bona fide statement that something is exactly that. But nothing is exactly that. Because it's always changing. So Krishna says, spend less time worrying about what other people are doing and saying. And Rumi says this also in the poem. Don't worry about what other people are doing or not doing. The rose doesn't care if someone calls it a thorn. What is an insult after all? But another person's grasping for meaning. So don't pay attention to these things. What should you pay attention to instead? Whatever it is that uplifts you, that truly uplifts you, that truly allows you to come to a place of greater peace and less storms, to come to a peace of calmer seas. Prayer, study, practice, what we call sadhana. More of that, service. Swami Shivananda was known for saying the quickest way to heal yourself is to serve the suffering of others so that they heal. So service. Use your energy in a way that helps the alleviation of suffering, that supports that, rather than deepens it. And that will provide both the recipient of your service as well as yourself heartfelt inspiration to know even more of the truth and to recognize even more of that which is false so that we don't get caught there like an insect in a spider web. Because that's what these little stories are that we tell ourselves. That was what my friend found, was that there was this whole spider web she had built around her aunt, And certainly some of it was accurate history. But what is history? It's something in the past. It's not what's happening in this exact moment. And so her aunt was like that little insect that was caught in the spider web, and so was she. So we need to start unraveling these stories so that we come closer to the truth. And the only way we come closer to the truth is by alleviating ourselves of harsh, critical judgment, extreme judgments. Extremes have not gotten humans anywhere in the history of humanity, except into war and devastation. That's the only place extremes have ever gotten us to. Whether that be global wars or internal wars, global devastation or internal devastation. So we do need to reorient ourselves and come to that middle road. It's not about perfection. It's not about leaving in here today and saying, that's it, I'm not going to judge anything anymore, because you just know that's another story. That's just another story. You're going to judge. It's what you've been taught how to do. And you've been taught very effectively, and so have I. So we are going to judge. But the beautiful thing is that maybe after this conversation, you catch yourself a little bit more often in a playful kind of way, not like the spider ensnaring its prey, but in a playful way of, oh, there's a judgment creeping up there. Okay, let's look at that before we react. What's actually happening here? Much of the time you're going to find that what you're reacting to is something in the deep past, not even in today. That this was a trigger of some way, shape, or form. And that it's bringing up something, it reminded you of something, and that you're actually reacting to the thing it's reminding you of and not to the current circumstance. You'll react to the current circumstance at some point in the future, most likely, right? When something else becomes a trigger. And then here's kind of the crazy part of it all is what you're actually reacting to. Yes, on the one hand, is an event from the past, but it's actually not even the event. It's the story you've told yourself and accepted about the event, which may not be the event at all. Or it could be worse, or it could be better. But rarely is it the exact. Does that make sense? Yeah. So we're looking back in time and we're using that as the basis for our triggers. And it's like we don't even know how accurate it is. So we got a lot of work to do, right? We've got a lot of internal work to do. But it does start in these places. It starts in looking and asking ourselves, how violent am I? When does that violence come to the surface? When do I become the storm? When do I start toppling over boats? When do I start denying potential? When do I start harming? And then we step back in a very humble light and we say, what do I need to do to change this now? To honor myself and say, this is part of my growth. This is why I'm here in this body at this time, is so that I can grow out of or beyond these tendencies, so that I can discover or rediscover within myself the innermost truth, even if it's just a little bit of that truth. That's why we're here. People look for purpose. They say, I got to go over here and look for purpose. I got to go over there and look for purpose. I got to climb to the top of the mountain, dive to the bottom of the ocean. What were we watching? We were watching something on one of the movies. I forget which one it was, but there was a great line in there. And it says, I'm going to paraphrase it. Perhaps your purpose is not to be found out there, but maybe it was perhaps your purpose is not to go find what your life is meant to be, but maybe your very own function is your purpose. Maybe you being you rediscovering the truth of yourself, the innermost truth, the peaceful self. Maybe that is your purpose. And that climbing to the top of a mountain somewhere or diving to the bottom of the ocean isn't going to display that for you. It's not going to cause you to remember it. What's going to cause you to come into remembrance of that aspect of yourself is to be with that aspect of yourself, which is in here, not out there. It's not to say don't go on vacation, don't go have a nice time, go see the world. The world is beautiful. But don't expect to find the truth of you out there. You're not going to. For that, you have to go in here, into the depth of your own heart. So I'll stop there and open it up for questions or reflections. Who has questions or reflections? Anybody? Yes.
I was just thinking what you said. I guess you could do both at the same time. Like if you want to discover the world or you want to do the things that you like to do, you take you with you. So you can do both at the same time, correct?
Mm-hmm. Sure. You definitely, your innermost self is wherever you carry it. Your body carries it to. Absolutely. So if you are going to, go out into the world and do things, don't go thinking that you're going to find yourself there, because you're already here. Instead, maybe looking at that travel as an opportunity to practice patience, to practice kindness, to practice compassion. Think about that next time you're on the security line at the airport, right? That's not like a reprieve from your sadhana. That is your sadhana, That is your sadhana. It was, so funny because when we went over to Ireland, and I think it was in March, oh, goodness, we went to security. We went through security. We got to the gate. Something happened with regard to our COVID tests. They weren't accepting the CDC cards. We had to go all the way back out through security, go to the CDC, to the table that was doing the international testing, pay for tests to be done, then go back through security, go back down to the gate, only to find out that there was something else we had to do. They probably weren't going to let us on the plane. We had to go through security 3 times that day. And I tell you, that was a sadhana. That was a sadhana, to not get angry at the security guards or at the person at the COVID testing site or at the representative of the airline or the person who was telling us you can't take this flight. That was a sadhana. That was a practice. That was a breathing in and breathing out and saying, okay, there is anger here. Absolutely, there's anger here, but what am I going to do with it? Am I going to make this person feel really bad about themselves? Or am I going to look inside and say to myself, what are my options here? What are my options? So we got tickets on a different airline. We're very blessed we were able to do that in that particular instance, But that's the sadhana. Yeah, totally. Is to say, the innermost self is here. It's not waiting for me over there. So let me call on that in this moment rather than the ego. Because the ego wants to annihilate everybody at that point, It's like you're all in my way. Lines around the airport with the security and stuff like that. And then there was this very kind man, one of the security guards, who said, come this way, And then you feel the shoulders drop down and you feel the breath get a little deeper. And why did that happen? Because kindness is that powerful. Kindness is that powerful that it ends the ego immediately. It's like someone shows you kindness and immediately those defensive boundaries go down, And you're reminded, it may not be in these words, but you are reminded there is an innermost self and it can be present here. It doesn't have to be a storm. And how many times have you heard? I mean, I worked I went and volunteered for the Red Cross right after 9/11. I went down that morning and signed up, and I was one of the early people that they accepted in as a volunteer immediately because they needed them so badly. And I worked with so many people who either lost people or who were having survivor's guilt because they were like, I was on my way to work and I just started vomiting in my car for no reason, and I would have been there had that not happened. I had to go home and change my suit. And then as I was getting in my car to drive back, there was the news. It's like for no reason. They weren't sick. They were fine. But these people over and over again, and they were taking on survivor's guilt. And it's psychological. It's very, it's normal, right, for people to have that experience. But we also have to look at that and say, we weren't meant to be there. We weren't meant to be there. So don't invest in that story that you have something to feel guilty about. Feel grief for the lives lost, yes, but your life was spared. Now what will you use that life for? What will you do with what you've been gifted? That's the sadhana. The sadhana is don't go to the extremes. The sadhana is come to the middle road no matter what you're facing. It's so hard, I know. It's such a devastating time for our country. It's such a devastating time for so many people. But one of the beautiful things that came from that was what? Did you see all the people who came together? All the support, all of the love, all of the how can I serve you? And in the midst of the kindness of those serving those who were suffering, we were able as a nation to begin the healing process. It wasn't because we jumped up and down and screamed war. It was because we showed up for each other and said, how can I serve you? We let the innermost self speak. That's when the healing truly begins. I know that went off a little bit from what you asked, but yeah. Any other questions or reflections? Does it all make sense? A little bit? Yeah. I hope that today's conversation serves you well and that you feel inspired in your own life. It doesn't have to be grandiose. You don't have to change everything by tomorrow at noon, okay? You don't, not even by Tuesday at noon. Yeah. You take your time because the change that comes about in little bits and pieces is the change that's going to build a strong foundation. That's the change that's going to prove itself to you over and over and over again is the change that you're patient with. The change that you're not patient with when we say by tomorrow at noon this is done or right now this is done, that change isn't going to last. So you're basically setting yourself up to have another story, a story of failure. So don't do that to yourself. Just say one thing. You know what? I have a tendency to be really impatient online at the grocery store. So instead, this time, I'm going to stand online at the grocery store and I'm going to use the concept of a story to allow myself to deepen compassion. Every person around me, I'm going to tell myself a story of their suffering and I'm going to wish them well. And then the person in front of you, they probably have lost somebody in this life because everybody has, or they're going to. That they've probably had their heart broken at some point because everybody has, or they're going to. So you tell yourself the story and you say, may you be safe, may you be healthy, may you be happy. May your suffering diminish. Then you turn and look at the person behind you and you do the same thing, and the person in the aisle next to you and on that side, and the cashier and the bag person, whoever is there, the manager of the store. You do the same thing over and over again so that your experience in the checkout line goes from being a self-pity party or a full-blown war to an opportunity to practice compassion. And then, if that has purpose for you, you expand it and you do it elsewhere. Online at the Division of Motor Vehicles, or the next time someone steals your parking spot, or, you just keep doing it whenever you can muster the energy and redirect it away from from an unhealthy ego and toward a healthy self. Yeah. All right, let's sit up tall. And we'll close the eyes and take a nice breath in and a nice breath out. Place the right hand on the heart, left hand over the right. And in this moment, invoke the innermost self, the peace, the calm, the unity, and the love. Let it inspire you. Allow it to bring forward the inspiration, the strength, the courage necessary to calm the storm and to alleviate the suffering. To shift from violence to service, from hate to love, from impatience to patience, and from hopelessness to faith. I'm drawing the hands together in front of the heart in the Anjali Mudra. We'll lift our voices in one Om. Take a breath in. Om. Hari Om. Jai Mata Di. Thank you all so much for being here today. So wonderful to gather with each of you. So good to see old friends and make new ones. Just wonderful to be in Sangha, to have you all here. As a gentle reminder, I leave on Wednesday. I'll be gone for 2 weeks, but Sunday morning yin class, Heather Ronco will be teaching, and Michelle will be cooking brunch. So please do come and enjoy, but Wisdom Circle won't happen those days, and morning meditation won't happen those days, just the yin class. And additionally, Wednesday evening kirtan won't happen for the next 2 weeks because Dayananda and Brahmani will be over there with me. And then when we come back, we will enter into our September schedule, and we will have a couple of announcements with regard to that when we get back, including a chanting program that will be working with Vedic chanting, which will be wonderful. So I hope to see you all there with that. We continue our Monday evening spiritual studies program. We're currently working through the Panchadasi, which is one of the prakaranas, or one of the defining scriptures that explains the basics about Advaita Vedanta. It gives a lot of answers for basic questions from students. What is God? What is the innermost self? What is faith? What is suffering? And so we work through this text chapter by chapter. Each program is 16 weeks, and we're in the third program now? I think the third program now. The Panchadasi, and then when the 16 weeks are up, we'll start another text. And so at the end of this program, which you can come at any point in time and into it, there'll be 20 texts that will be covered, 20 scriptures that will be covered. There's chanting, there's meditation, there's satsang, and question and answer, of course. And so it's all just meant to support you in deepening your inquiry and just having more of a focus of, what to do in your own life when you have obstacles and challenges and you're longing for growth. So you can always come as a drop-in, or you can sign up for the entire module. Each module is 16 weeks long. So with that, I'll let you go eat. If you haven't yet, it smells wonderful. Please say thank you to Linda down in the kitchen, and I think Julie is down there with her today. Let her feel the love and appreciation for the service that she commits to the ashram every week. Thank you all so much, and we'll see you soon. Have a good day.